Grace wiped down the steel counter for the third time that hour, her reflection distorted in its polished surface. The Imperial quarantine station orbiting Proxima Centauri b wasn't exactly where she'd imagined ending up when she'd left Earth, but cafeteria work paid the bills. Most days, she served protein pastes and synthesized vegetables to doctors, xenobiologists, and the occasional dignitary. Today was different. Today, they'd brought in a dragon. Not a literal dragon. Of course, that's just what the media called the Drakthari. They were an ancient species, reptilian and massive, with scales that shimmered like oil on water and wings that could span a small spacecraft. They'd been humanity's first contact with intelligent alien life, and for 200 years, an uneasy peace had held between their empire and humanity's scattered colonies. Prince Adrian of the Flame Crest dynasty was dying. Grace had heard the whispers in the cafeteria line that morning. The Drakthari prince had contracted a rare pathogen during a diplomatic mission to one of the outer colonies. The disease was ravaging his system, and despite the best efforts of the station's medical team, he was wasting away. Worse, he'd stopped eating entirely 3 days ago. Grace! Dr. Chen burst through the kitchen doors, her lab coat askew. "We need you upstairs. Now." Grace blinked. "Me? I think you've got the wrong person, Doc. I just serve the food. That's exactly why we need you." Dr. Chen grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the elevator. "The prince. He won't accept food from anyone. We've tried every member of the medical staff, cultural liaisons, even his own attendants. But this morning, when you sent up his breakfast tray, the elevator doors opened to the quarantine wing." Grace's pulse quickened. "He ate," Dr. Chen finished. "Every single bite. Only from the tray you prepared." They stopped outside a viewing window. Inside, Grace could see him, Prince Adrian. He was smaller than she'd expected, barely 10 feet long, his once magnificent scales now dull and cracked. His breathing was labored, each exhale producing a faint wisp of smoke. His amber eyes were half closed. "Why me?" Grace whispered. "We don't know. Drakthari biology is complicated. They're empathic to a degree we're still studying. Maybe he senses something in you. Calm. Kindness. Who knows? But Grace, if he doesn't eat, he'll be dead by tomorrow." Grace stared at the dying prince. She thought of her own brother, who'd wasted away from cancer when she was 17. She remembered the helplessness, the frustration of watching someone fade. "What do I need to do?" An hour later, Grace stood in the climate-controlled chamber, a tray of specially formulated nutrient gel in her hands. The air was thick and hot, calibrated for Drakthari physiology. Sweat already beaded on her forehead. Adrian's massive head lifted slightly, one amber eye fixed on her. "Your Highness," Grace said softly, moving closer. Her hands trembled, but she kept her voice steady. "I brought you lunch." The prince's nostrils flared. A low rumble emanated from his chest, not threatening, but questioning. Grace knelt beside him, setting the tray down. "I know you probably don't want to eat. When my brother was sick, he didn't either. Said everything tasted like ash." She dipped a spoon into the gel. "But he kept trying. Because people cared about him. And I think people care about you, too." Mining. 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 Adrian's gaze never left her face. Slowly, painfully, he extended his neck. His mouth filled with teeth, like crystalline daggers, opened slightly. Grace's hand shook as she lifted the spoon. She'd been briefed on Drakthari anatomy, knew that one wrong move, one perception of threat, could trigger defensive instincts even in his weakened state. But she thought of her brother. Of all the times she'd sat beside his hospital bed, patient and present. The prince's forked tongue touched the spoon, then withdrew. A moment passed. Then he opened his mouth wider, accepting the food. Grace felt something loosen in her chest. "There we go," she murmured. one bite at a time. She fed him slowly, speaking in a low, constant stream. She told him about Earth, about the cafeteria, about how she'd never expected to be hand-feeding an alien prince. To her surprise, Adrian began to respond not with words, but with small movements. A flick of his tail, a rumble that might have been agreement. By the time the tray was empty, 2 hours had passed. "I'll be back for dinner," Grace promised, standing. Her knees ached from kneeling on the hard floor. Adrian's head dipped once a nod. Over the next week, Grace became a fixture in the quarantine wing. 3 times a day, she brought Adrian his meals. 3 times a day, she sat with him, talking about nothing and everything. The prince's scales began to regain their luster. His breathing steadied. The medical team was baffled, but hopeful. On the 8th day, Adrian spoke. "Why?" His voice was like distant thunder, each word carefully formed through a mouth not built for human language. Grace looked up from the tray. "Why what? Why? Do you care?" "I am not. You're kind." Grace considered the question. "You're right. You're not human. But you're someone's son. Someone's friend. Maybe. And you're scared and sick and far from home." Adrian's tail curled around himself. "My people would not do this. Not for a human." "Maybe," Grace said gently. "But I'm not doing this for your people. I'm doing it for you." Something shifted in the prince's expression. His third eyelid, the one Drakthari used to hide emotion, slid back fully for the first time since she'd met him. "You are strange, Grace of Earth," Adrian said. But his tone was warm, strange, and kind. 3 weeks later, Grace stood in the observation deck, watching the Drakthari royal vessel depart. Adrian had recovered fully, his scales gleaming gold and crimson under the station lights. Before he'd left, he'd pressed his forehead to hers, a gesture of profound respect among his kind. "You know this changes everything, right?" Dr. Chen said beside her. "The Drakthari ambassador has already requested you by name for the next cultural exchange." Grace laughed. "I'm just a cafeteria worker." "No," Dr. Chen said, smiling. "You're the human who taught a dragon prince that kindness transcends species. That's worth more than any treaty." Grace watched the ship disappear into the void, carrying Adrian home. She thought about the simple act of feeding someone, of being present in their suffering. Maybe that was humanity's real strength, not weapons or technology, but the stubborn, inconvenient insistence on caring, even for dragons.